This is the first lesson of process grid component training. And in this lesson, we're going to build a process grid for an expected receipts for PO receiving. And ultimately, we're going to be able to enter in that grid the receiving amount, the bin, and the lot, and call the receiving object. So let's get started. I'm logged into the project Process Grid Component Training 1. This is first in a series of process grid components. We'll start with selecting a process grid. And we're going to call this Lesson 1. And we're going to do an expected receipts. Receiving. We're going to do this to call a receiving object. But first we have to build the process grid. And we would put this on a menu. And this would be a transaction. Now you notice there's a few different fields here. We're going to keep execute checked rows. Well, there's a couple options here. One, you can either execute all rows or have check rows option. This allows you to select individual rows by doing this method versus just automatically processing everything in a grid. And we're going to show the transaction status column, which are our default entries. So we'll just take those as defaults. I'm going to just copy the SQL in here. It's quite a bit of SQL. We're going to be obviously operating off the PO ordered line. So most of the fields that we need to look at will be coming from the PO ordered line. But we do need the order status from the order header just so we can look at only open POs. We need the vendor name from the vendor file because that name is not stored anywhere in the PO tables. And later on, as we work through this transaction, we're going to need to know if it's a serial lot item, which you can only get from the item table because that data is not stored in the ordered line, unlike order entry where it is in the order line table. And the other thing we don't know is multi-bin, so we have to make a link to the IM/INV loc table so that we can get the multi-bin flag. We'll need those later on to make some judgment decisions inside the grid on whether we need to be concerned with bins and lots. And we also, because we want to look at days late, we did a calculation here. We looked at the request date against get date to calculate a date diff for a days late value. And this is the simplest part of the training. We're just going to create the grid. It's not going to do anything. We'll preview it. We'll do a cleanup on the grid. We have the serial lot flag, the multi-bin flag, the days late field. We have quantity ordered, quantity remaining. And we have line status and ord status, which in the filter conditions I already forced to be P only. So really, I don't need those. And we do need the unit of measure, quantity or quantity remaining, promise date. Let's move those fields over a little bit to give room for these fields. This is our status field. And as always, let's format word wrap. That'll give us a little more room on the grid. We can shorten these up is our move to. Quantity remaining. I'm going to take the promise date off just to make a little more room. And I think that's good for now. And that's really the end of our first lesson. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video tutorial, and I encourage you to move on to the next video tutorial in this series.